もし明日から法律を守らなくていいとしたら、あなたはどうしますか？赤信号、止まる必要なんて本当にあるのか？お金、これはただの紙切れだ。でもなぜ私たちはこれを価値あるものとして扱うのか？親は大事にするべき？そう教わってきた。でもそれはなぜ？お墓参りは大切？亡くなった人がそれを望んでいるのがわかるとでも？努力すれば報われる？では報われなかった努力は？そんなの当たり前だ。本当に？ではもし私たちがそれを信じなくなったら、本日は私たちが日々の生活の中で無意識に受け入れている価値観やルール、社会の秩序を支えている目に見えない枠組みは一体どのように成り立っているのか、なぜ私たちはそれを疑うことなく生きているのか、それについて探っていきたいと思います。先生、本日はよろしくお願いいたします。
Nice to meet you.
先生、私たちが当たり前だと思っていることが、実は社会の秩序を支える根幹になっているのではないかと考えるに至りました。でもそれがどうして成り立っているのか、なぜ私たちは疑うことなく、そういうものだと受け入れているのか。実際のところ、その正体をしっかり説明できる人はほとんどいないと思います。先生、この仕組みを説明する概念があると聞いています。それは一体何なのでしょうか？
That's a very good question. The one who theoretically analyzed this issue was the Japanese thinker, Yoshimoto Takaki. He analyzed the invisible framework of human society and explained it with the concept of Kyoto Genso, shared fantasy. Kyoto Genso refers to the shared beliefs and values of an entire society. This is a unique phenomenon that appears only in humans. We live our daily lives following invisible rules. Obeying the law, attending school, using money, making efforts. All of these do not have a physical existence, but they function because society collectively believes this is how things should be. In other words, society is sustained by everyone believing in intangible rules and values.
なるほど。では具体的にどんなものが共同幻想にあたるのでしょうか？
Let's take money as an example. For instance, this 1,000 yen bill, it's just a piece of paper, isn't it? But we believe it has a value of 1,000 yen. That is why we can use this piece of paper to buy food and receive it as payment for our labor.
確かに、お金そのものに価値があるわけではなく、それを価値があるとみんなが信じているから成り立っているんですね。
Exactly. Now, what would happen if tomorrow everyone suddenly believed that money is just a worthless piece of paper?
取引が成立しなくなり、経済が崩壊しますね。
That's right. Money is not just a material object. It is upheld by our collective belief that this has value. Now, how about the law? The law itself does not have physical power. It is just a collection of words on paper. But we think laws must be obeyed. That is why people refrain from breaking rules and comply with court rulings.
言われてみれば法律は単なる言葉や文章でしかないのに、なぜか人々を動かす強い力を持っていますね。
Exactly. That's because the law is a shared fantasy that everyone believes in. What would happen if one day the entire population started believing that laws have no meaning?
ルールを守る人がいなくなる。はじめは赤信号を守らないなど些細なことから始まり、つまるところ殺人、暴行、窃盗が横行し、社会が崩壊してしまう。
That's exactly it. Then why do people believe that money has value and laws must be obeyed? The root of that belief lies in the concept of the 5T nation state. It is because of the existence of nations that currency systems are established, and it is within the framework of the state that laws hold power.
つまり、お金や法律が信じられるのは、その背後に国家という前提があるから？
That's right. If the nation did not exist, the credibility of currencies like yen or dollars would collapse and there would be no governing body to enforce laws. Then, what is a nation? You are all living in the country called Japan, but does Japan physically exist? There is a landmass called the Japanese archipelago, but Japan as a nation is invisible.
確かに、国境線も地図に線が引かれているだけで、実際に地面にここからが日本という物理的な境界があるわけではありませんね。
That's right. A nation exists because people believe this is Japan. Just as Japan existed yesterday, it exists today. And because we believe it will exist tomorrow, the day after, and for hundreds of years to come, it continues to be sustained. What would happen if one day all Japanese citizens collectively believed that Japan does not exist?
国家の枠組みが崩れてしまう。
That's exactly it. It is because the state exists that we can use the Japanese yen, abide by Japanese laws, and live within Japanese society. The state is the foundation of all things that people believe in. In other words, all social structures are sustained because people believe in them. Money, laws, and nations are not the only ones. Values such as one should respect their parents or effort will be rewarded are also the same. These things do not physically exist, but when people believe in them, as if they do, social order is created and maintained. Yoshimoto Takaki named this structure of society Kyodo Genso. We sustain society by sharing this fantasy.
ではここで少し考えてみたいことがあります。この共同幻想が崩れると、人間社会に具体的にどのような影響を与えるのでしょうか。
That is a very important question. To conclude, when a shared fantasy collapses, society falls into disorder. Society exists because people have common beliefs and uphold them. If those beliefs disappear, rules cease to function, and people's actions become chaotic. When we look back at history, there are many examples of societies falling into turmoil the moment their shared fantasy collapsed. For instance, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Until that point, Soviet society was sustained by the shared fantasy of communism. The people believed if the government controls everything, an equal society will be realized. They believed that overthrowing the rich, seizing wealth through force, and redistributing it equally would lead to a utopian society. But what happened when that fantasy collapsed? The state instantly lost its power, and social order descended into chaos. The transition to a market economy was poorly executed. Essential goods became scarce, and crime surged. Military and police institutions, which had served as instruments of state control, stopped functioning, and some areas turned into lawless zones.
つまりそれまで信じていた社会の秩序が一瞬で崩壊してしまったということですか。
Exactly. People believed in the existence of the Soviet Union. They used its currency, obeyed its laws, and lived within its social structure. But when the nation, their shared fantasy, disappeared, they no longer knew what to believe in. As a result, the economy collapsed, laws ceased to function, and people's lives plunged into turmoil. Another example is the Rwandan genocide of 1994. In Rwanda, two ethnic groups, the Hutu and the Watutsi, had coexisted for a long time, forming the framework of their nation. However, in April 1994, following the assassination of the Rwandan president, a Hutu, a new fantasy spread. The Tutsi are the enemy of the state and must be eliminated. The government and media demonized the Tutsi and incited the Hutu population with messages like, "If you do not exterminate the Tutsi, they will destroy you."
昨日までの隣人が突然敵になったということですか。
Exactly. The shared fantasy that had held their society together collapsed, and a new fantasy was implanted, leading ordinary Hutu citizens to take up weapons and kill their Tutsi neighbors. In some tragic cases, children with a Hutu identity even murdered their own Tutsi parents. In just 100 days, over 800,000 people were slaughtered, and the entire social structure disintegrated.
本当に悲惨な出来事ですね。共同幻想が崩れると、こんなにも急激に社会が変わってしまうんですね。
That is precisely correct. A shared fantasy is the foundation of social order. When it collapses, people's behavior spirals out of control. When we analyze history, one thing becomes clear. That is, society cannot exist without shared fantasies. If people stop believing in the value of money, the economy will collapse. If people stop believing in the legitimacy of the law, order will disappear. If people stop believing in the frameworks of ethnicity and nationality, they will lose their sense of unity and society itself will fall apart. In other words, human society is fundamentally sustained by the sharing of invisible beliefs.
なるほど。社会が機能するためには、みんなが同じ幻想を信じることが必要なんですね。
That is correct. And here arises an important issue. How can we maintain these shared fantasies and pass them on to the next generation?
教育でしょうか。
Exactly. The most powerful means of preserving shared fantasies is education.
先生、これまでのお話で、社会を維持するために共同幻想が必要であり、その最も根源的な幻想が国家であることが分かりました。そしてその国家という共同幻想を次世代に継承する手段が教育だということも理解できました。では具体的に教育はどのようにして共同幻想を形作り、それを継承しているのでしょうか。
To understand this, we must first consider the two aspects of education. The first is Kenkyo, exoteric teaching. Education that focuses on the transmission of knowledge and skills. The second is Mikyo, esoteric teaching. Education that instills values, ethics, and a sense of belonging to the state to sustain society's shared fantasies. In modern times, the emphasis has been overwhelmingly placed on the exoteric aspect of education. Mathematics, science, language, history, and technical skills. All of these are taught to enhance individual knowledge and abilities. However, education's function does not end with the improvement of personal skills. Education has another, more invisible purpose. That is to preserve social order and ensure the continuity of the state by instilling values in the next generation. In other words, to make them embrace shared fantasies. This is the role played by subjects such as history, moral education, and national language education. History education is not just about learning past events. History is also a narrative that forms the identity of a nation or people. For example, in the United States, the idea that it is a nation of freedom and democracy is embedded in education. The American Revolutionary War is taught as a heroic struggle to gain independence from British rule. In reality, economic factors played a major role. But in education, the emphasis is placed on the fight for freedom. The Civil War is another example. It is taught as a war to end slavery and bring freedom and equality. But in reality, in the North where Lincoln was from, black people had little to no rights. However, in American education, the war is framed as a battle for freedom. Similarly, in the 20th century, particularly during World War II, America is portrayed as having fought to protect democracy. During the Cold War, the narrative was that America fought against communism to protect freedom, reinforcing the idea of American righteousness. In this way, history education constructs the story that America has always fought for freedom, which becomes a shared fantasy passed down through generations. The same applies elsewhere. France emphasizes its identity as a country of human rights and revolution, while China promotes itself as a civilization with 5,000 years of history. Even though China, as a unified entity, has never truly existed, as its history is a cycle of dynastic changes. In short, history education, regardless of its factual accuracy, mixes fiction into a structured narrative to make students believe in a continuous link between the past and present, legitimizing the current state and projecting it into the future. Moral education is another crucial means of passing down shared fantasies. For instance, beliefs like effort will be rewarded, one should respect their parents, and rules must be followed, are all reinforced through education. These values serve as the moral foundation for social stability, helping individuals share a common ethical framework that maintains societal cohesion. But the emphasis of moral education varies depending on the country. In Japan, there was a set of principles known as the Imperial Rescript on Education. Today, it is treated as a taboo, which is regrettable. It was an excellent guideline for instilling the correct shared fantasy among the Japanese people. Now, it has been vilified under the shared fantasy that pre-war Japan was evil. What a foolish development! Many of the issues occurring in Japan's schools today stem from the fact that the Imperial Rescript on Education is no longer properly utilized. National language education is also a major tool for shaping shared fantasies. Language is not just a means of communication. It functions as a mechanism to internalize values and worldviews. The literary works and texts selected for school textbooks are carefully chosen to cultivate specific moral perspectives and national consciousness. For example, in the United States, many stories celebrate freedom, independence, and individual rights, while in Japan, stories emphasizing harmony, cooperation, and diligence are more common. These differences are not just cultural, they are deliberate strategies to reproduce the shared fantasies necessary for each society. Furthermore, certain words themselves serve to reinforce shared fantasies. Words like citizen, democracy, and patriotism become embedded in public consciousness simply by being used without question, further solidifying national identity. In this way, national language education is not just about teaching communication skills. It plays a crucial role in forming the shared fantasy that maintains social order. In the end, education is not just about transmitting knowledge. It is about passing down shared fantasies to the next generation. Exoteric education transmits knowledge and skills. Esoteric education instills values that sustain the state and society. Acquiring knowledge and embracing shared fantasies are two sides of the same coin. Since shared fantasies form the foundation of society, when they are misdirected, it is crucial to have individuals capable of recognizing, criticizing, and correcting them. That is the role of an educated intellectual. An intellectual is not someone who blindly accepts shared fantasies, but rather someone who approaches them critically, analyzes them scientifically, and reconstructs them in a way that benefits society. Because education is both a transmitter of knowledge and a creator of shared fantasies, it must foster both intellectual rigor and the ability to embrace shared beliefs in a balanced way. This, I believe, is the true meaning of the completion of character, stated in Article 1 of the Fundamental Law of Education.
なるほど。教育が単なる知識の伝達ではなく、社会を作るための装置であるということばかりでなく、謙虚と密教のバランスこそが重要ということなんですね。
Exactly. And now, I pose an important question to you. Does the current Japanese education system maintain this balance? Does Japanese education properly convey the shared fantasy that sustains the Japanese nation?
確かに。日本の教育がどのような共同幻想を継承しているのか気になりますね。
Before examining Japan's education system, let us first look at how other countries construct their shared fantasies through education. First, we will begin with the United States.